Hi, Steve Sleeper here, and I'm speaking today with Brad Litchfield, and we're going to talk about divorce and custody. Brad, how are you today?
Great morning.
Yeah, good. Yeah, looks like a beautiful day there in Eugene.
Yeah, it's great. It's fall and it's football season and it's everything's going right, at least so far this year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And as we're speaking, this is the weekend that Oregon's playing Nebraska, and I'm in Omaha and you're in Eugene. So
Yes.
little serendipity here. Well, hey, we're going to talk today about custody. When a couple gets divorced, the custody's involved. Tell me, what is custody?
Okay. It's interesting. Custody is often a very controversial thing when parties get divorced. People fight and scratch each other's eyes out to get custody of the child. And most of the time it is not or should not be such a controversial thing. Custody really means who makes the educational, religious, healthcare decisions for a child. And most of the time those are not really that much in contention. There was a lawyer that's retired recently that I respected, always used to talk about this crown of custody. Who wears this crown of custody? And a lot of the time, it's fine. Nobody really ever has any problems with it. Where it becomes a problem, though, is where mom and dad really have high conflict, where there is just so much nastiness between the parents that these issues do become significant. And so that's when you need to think seriously about, is it okay for me to have joint custody, meaning we both equally share those decisions? Or do I need to have sole custody? So when there's high conflict, I say, think long and hard before you agree to a joint custody order. But most of the time, it's in the child's best interest if mom and dad share custody. Even if you can get a semblance of cooperation between the two of you, it's better for the kid to have joint custody.
Now, does custody and parenting time, are those is that used interchangeably, and should it be?
Yeah, so that's also a really good question. That's one of the big areas of confusion. What does custody mean, and what is parenting time? Parenting time, it used to be called visitation. So one person can have sole custody of a child or children, yet the other parent have 50-50 parenting time, complete equal parenting time. The visitation is equal, yet one person gets to decide, as I talked about, the religion and the healthcare issues and the education issues. So parenting time is when you see your kid, and custody is who wears that crown of custody, who makes those key decisions that most of the time aren't that controversial. That makes sense? You understand that kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say somebody's going for sole custody.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth fighting for that?
It's a really good question. Again, you have to kind of make that cost-benefit analysis, right? Is it worth the acrimony and the expense and the nastiness and the trauma to the kid, frankly, with mom and dad fighting over the kid? Is it worth that to be able to get you the sole decision-making authority for the child? And that needs to be considered, I guess, in every specific case. Many times I will tell people, not worth it, not worth the fight, not worth the money. Save your money for your kid's college fund.
Yeah.
Don't spend it on lawyers.
Yeah. Good point. So how is custody determined?
So Oregon has a statute or a law that talks about the different things that need to be met before a judge can make a decision. Judge rules on custody. Those include, who's the primary caregiver for the child, who's going to best allow the child to love the other parent, and that's my kind of distillation of the rules. But most of the time, in most of the cases, it comes down to really two factors. Number one, who has been the primary caregiver for the child? And number two, and sometimes even more important than who's been the primary caregiver for the child, who is going to allow the child to love the other parent? Who's gonna try and not alienate the child from mom, or not alienate the child from dad, or who's gonna encourage the child to have healthy relationships with other people? A lot of the times when these cases go to trial, a judge, even though a parent might be the primary caregiver, if that care that parent is given is not healthy to the child, a judge is going to switch custody to the other parent. So again, it just depends. And that's a rotten answer, but every fact situation is different. But it's not as cut and dried as it used to be. In the 60s, right? Mom's got custody. Now, mom's just always got custody. And that is not the case anymore. It practically, right, legally, it's not the case. And practically, it's not the case. Mom and dads both do well in the courtroom. And I don't think in most courts in Oregon, there is a bias against dads. So hopefully that's heartening for most people, that just because you're dad doesn't mean you're locked out of being the custodial parent.
So I suppose all things being equal, it just depends. But now, what if there are extreme cases like abusive situations?
Yeah. The presumption in those situations are, if you're an abusive parent, then it's written in the laws of the state of Oregon that if you are an abusive parent, you're not gonna get custody. Now you can get over that burden. You can say, yeah, I've had problems in the past, but the other parent is having so many issues right now. Even though I had some problems in the past, I still should be the custodial parent for the kids. And judges do that. Judges will assess what's in the best interest of the kids. So, but generally speaking, an abusive parent is not going to get custody.
And it is all about the kids, and you want mom and dad to be as civil as they possibly can, in the best interest of the kids, and do what's best for the kids. Are there ideal ways to part company?
Yeah, some ways are better than others, for sure. Some people try and work together collaboratively, keeping their kids in mind, keeping the needs of the kids, not making kids be part of the dispute between mom and dad. And that's really the best way to go. There's a local judge here in Eugene that will often say to litigants, and I really agree with what she's saying. She says, just because you don't love each other anymore, just because husband and wife doesn't love each other anymore, that doesn't mean that the kids don't love each of you. And don't make children part of these adult decisions. Allow your kids to be kids and have the adults make the adult decision. And that is really great advice, but man, it is hard in practice to not try and get your child to align himself or herself with you. That is super hard to do. And so if there's one best way to divorce, to part company, it's don't screw up your kids, because the pain of the divorce will go away, but the pain that you cause for your kid will be, in many situations, lifelong. So don't screw up your kid, even though your ex-wife or ex-husband, soon-to-be ex-wife or soon-to-be ex-husband, is just very difficult. Don't bring your kids into it, if absolutely at all possible. And that can be really hard to do.
Well, yeah, and those supercharged emotions, those will go away, but you don't want to do permanent damage to the kids.
Yeah, that's very true.
Now, let me ask, does mediation help with that?
Yeah. So mediation can be a great way to get things done. Very few cases in Oregon, divorce cases, actually go in front of a judge to make the decision. So most of the time, individuals themselves or through lawyers, they will work out a resolution, and that's great. That's what needs to happen most of the time. And sometimes you need somebody else. You need a third party to come in and help you get there. There are lots of options, lots of ways of doing that. You can both, husband and wife can say, let's go to a third party mediator, somebody that specializes in getting things done. It's a good option. But in that situation, neither of you is represented by the mediator. The mediator can't really push what he or she thinks is the best for the situation. So if you've got one person that's really strong and the other person that's weak, sometimes in mediation, one of the two parties can get steamrolled. Not always, but sometimes. And so sometimes people will work with their lawyers in the background in a mediation context, or sometimes people will use their lawyers to facilitate that mediation. Again, every situation is different. I think it's worthwhile speaking to a lawyer and talking to your spouse or partner about possible mediation, and just checking to see which of those options works best for you. In the county where I'm at, Eugene, in Lane County, judges make themselves available to run interference between the parties as long as you have lawyers. And that's a really great resource where lawyer and client and the other lawyer and client will go over to the courthouse and meet with the judge in separate rooms. And the judge will set people straight and tell the parties what the judge he or she thinks should happen. And it's very effective. It's a great way to do it. So your question, is mediation a good way to get it done? Absolutely. It's really, in my view, the best way to get it done. But there are different kinds of mediation options that I think are available to people here in Oregon, and certainly in Eugene, that I like a lot. So
yeah, good information to know. Yeah. Now, any final advice?
I often say to people, if you are done your relationship, if it is done, if it's over, if it's, it's done, then get it done. If it's not done, if you have questions, go to a counselor. Work harder on keeping your first relationship together if you can. But if it's done, get it done. Move on. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean giving everything up, but don't drag it out. It's too painful, too expensive, too frustrating to drag it out any longer than it needs to be. But at the same time, I'm saying get it done, get it done. You really want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to be successful with your child in the future, but also successful financially in the future. Sometimes the pain of a separation and divorce is so intense, so overwhelming, so emotionally difficult. People just say, I'm going to give everything up. I just want to move on. And that's really puts you in a very difficult position down the line if you give up too much. So my advice, get it done, but get it done fairly, and don't screw up your kids. How's that for final advice?
Excellent. Thanks, Brad.